They thought she was just another woman sitting alone in a bar, quiet stranger with a glass of whiskey. But when two young rangers mocked the tattoo on her arm, they had no idea they were taunting one of the most decorated legends in military history. This is not just a story about arrogance and humiliation. It's about what happens when prejudice collides with hidden greatness. It's about respect, redemption, and the kind of power that never needs to raise its voice. Welcome to the Navy Rangers mocked the black woman's tattoo until the general walked in. A story in the style of Undercover Boss, Undercover CEO, and Celebrity Undercover Stories, where the quietest person in the room turns out to be the one with the greatest authority. Stay until the end, because the lesson she teaches will change the way you see respect, power, and true leadership. They say legends don't announce themselves. They don't walk into a room wearing medals or shouting about their past. Legends sit quietly, unnoticed, until someone makes the mistake of calling them out. And that's exactly what happened one humid Friday night inside Harbor Light Bar, a dimly lit hangout a block away from the Norfolk Naval Base in Virginia. The place smelled of beer and salt water, with neon signs flickering against wood-paneled walls. It was the kind of bar where uniforms mixed with civilian clothes, where young sailors bragged too loudly, and where older veterans kept their stories to themselves. At the far end of the counter sat a woman, mid-30s black, wearing a plain black shirt and jeans. She wasn't looking for attention. She stirred her glass of whiskey slowly, watching ice melt in amber silence. Her name, though no one cared to ask yet, was Naomi Carter. Near the jukebox, two young Navy Rangers were already half drunk. Derek Cole, 29, carried himself like the room belonged to him. Broad shoulders, buzz cut, the swagger of someone who had seen combat but enjoyed retelling it even more. Beside him sat Luis Romero, 27, wiry and sharp-tongued, always ready to echo Derek's bravado. "Hey, waitress." Derek's voice cut through the chatter. "Another round for the real soldiers here." The bartender rolled his eyes but poured anyway. The shout wasn't meant for him. It was aimed across the bar toward Naomi, who hadn't even turned her head. Luis laughed and slapped Derek's arm. "She didn't hear you, man. Maybe she's deaf. Or maybe she's just ignoring us." Derek grinned, raising his glass. The men at their table chuckled, the kind of laughter that grows louder when alcohol mixes with arrogance. Naomi didn't flinch. She just took another sip, her calmness infuriating them more than if she had snapped back. Then Luis noticed something. "Hey, check that out." He nudged Derek, pointing toward her left arm. The sleeve of Naomi's shirt had slid just enough to reveal ink. Not the kind of flashy tattoo you see on shore leave. This was different. A falcon, wings tucked, etched in precise lines that seemed almost coded. Derek squinted and smirked. What the hell is that supposed to be? Some wannabe Ranger ink? He raised his voice, making sure others could hear. "Hey, lady." "Nice fake tattoo. What unit is that supposed to be?" "Never seen a symbol like that." Heads turned. A few older vets at the bar shifted uneasily, though they stayed quiet. Naomi placed her glass on the counter, slow, deliberate, but she still didn't speak. The silence irritated Derek. He stood, the chair legs screeching against the floor. "I'm talking to you," he said, swaggering toward her. "What unit are you pretending to be from?" "That falcon? Looks like something out of a video game." Luis followed, enjoying the attention. "Yeah, tell us the story. Which supply office stamped that ink on you? Or was it just the tattoo shop downtown?" Naomi finally turned her head. Her eyes met theirs, calm and steady like deep water. She didn't look angry. She didn't even look amused. She looked certain. And for a brief second, Derek's throat tightened. But the room was watching, and he wasn't about to lose face. He leaned closer, voice dripping condescension. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or maybe you just don't have a story to tell." Naomi's lips curved into something between a smile and a warning. Her voice, when it came, was soft but sharp enough to cut glass. "You sure you want to know the story?" The words hung in the air. The bar grew quieter, conversations fading into nervous glances. Even the jukebox seemed to play lower. Derek chuckled, though his laugh sounded forced. "Yeah, sweetheart. Impress us. Tell us what makes that little falcon so special." Naomi didn't answer immediately. She turned back to her glass, swirling the whiskey one last time. The ice clinked softly, a sound that felt louder than the men's laughter had minutes earlier. She set the drink down and rested her hand near the tattoo, letting the dim light catch the edges of the ink. The falcon seemed to come alive under the glow, its feathers patterned in ways that didn't look random at all. There was meaning carved in every line, but only a few would ever understand it. Derek didn't. Neither did Luis. They saw a mystery and mistook it for weakness, and that mistake was about to cost them far more than they could imagine. The bar was alive with that restless energy you only find near a military base. Young men full of bravado, eager to prove themselves, and just drunk enough to do something stupid. Derek Cole stood there grinning, convinced he had the upper hand. Luis Romero lingered close behind, nodding, always ready to play backup. But Naomi Carter didn't rush to answer. She let the moment stretch, as if silence itself was her weapon. She turned slowly on the bar stool, facing them fully now. The dim light caught her face, calm, unshaken, with the kind of poise you don't fake. You must be deaf as well as blind. Luis snorted, trying to break the tension with a cruel joke. That's when Naomi finally spoke. Her voice was steady even, but every syllable sliced through the laughter. Be careful what you say next. The words weren't loud, yet the room shifted. Conversations faltered. Dice stopped rolling at the back table. A few heads turned, curiosity sparking. Derek's grin wavered for half a second before he forced it back. What's that supposed to mean? He said, chuckling like a man who wanted to sound tougher than he felt. It's a bar. We're joking. Don't get so serious. Naomi tilted her head, eyes narrowing, not in anger but in assessment. The way a hawk studies its prey before deciding whether to strike. Luis caught the look too, though he masked his unease with sarcasm. Look, we're just asking a simple question. Where'd you get that tattoo? I've been in this game a while and I've never seen it. Maybe you should explain before people start thinking you're making things up. He expected a flinch, a blush, some defensive excuse. Instead, Naomi reached for her glass, lifted it and took a slow sip. Her hand was steady, not a hint of nervousness. That steadiness made Derek uneasy. He covered it with a laugh. See? No answer. She knows it's a fake. Probably Googled something cool and told the tattoo guy to copy it. The people nearby started whispering, shifting in their seats. A couple of older men in the corner, retired sailors judging by their faded ball caps, watched intently, saying nothing. Their silence carried weight, like they recognized something the younger soldiers did not. Naomi set her glass down, leaned forward slightly, and spoke just above a whisper. You think you know every symbol, but you don't, and that scares you. The statement landed harder than any shout. Derek blinked, surprised. Luis opened his mouth to retort, but nothing came out. For a moment, it wasn't clear who held the power. Derek's pride demanded he push back, but his gut told him to step away. He chose pride. You're full of it, he said, voice louder than before, as if volume could mask uncertainty. I've been in the Rangers 6 years. I've trained with the best. If that symbol meant anything, I'd recognize it. And trust me, I don't. Naomi's expression didn't change. Her calmness felt unnatural in a place where drunken arguments usually spiraled into fists. She didn't look like someone bluffing. She looked like someone waiting for the right moment. Luis, sensing the crowd's attention, decided to escalate. Come on, tell us. What is it, coffee division? Paper pusher corpse? Or maybe it's just something you picked up off Pinterest. Laughter bubbled up again, but weaker this time. The bar wasn't fully on their side anymore. People were curious. Who was this woman who didn't react the way they expected? Naomi tapped her finger lightly on the counter, once, twice. Then she leaned back, her gaze sweeping over Derek, Luis, and the gathering crowd. You want to know? She said softly. The room hushed again. Of course we do, Derek shot back quickly, arms crossing over his chest. Tell us before we fall asleep. Naomi glanced at the clock above the bar. The second hand ticked slowly, steady as her voice. Not yet. You're not ready to hear it, Derek barked a laugh. Not ready? Lady, I've been in firefights you can't even imagine. Think I can handle a story about some ink? Naomi's lips curved just slightly. Not a smile. Something sharper. She picked up her glass, drained the last of the whiskey, and set it down with a quiet thud. The sound carried farther than it should have. She stood, taller than Derek expected, and when she rose to her full height, something about her presence made even the loudest voices dim. She stepped closer, close enough for Derek to see every detail of the tattoo under the dim light. The falcon's feathers weren't random lines. They were deliberate, symmetrical, like codes etched into living skin. To most, it meant nothing. To a trained eye, it hinted at secrets unspoken. Derek swallowed hard, though he didn't understand why. Luis shifted uneasily but forced another laugh. "You see that?" Derek said, gesturing to the ink as if the audience needed convincing. "That's nothing but a bird. And you know what? Birds don't scare rangers." Naomi leaned in just enough for him to hear, her eyes steady, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "Then maybe you haven't faced the right kind of bird." The words froze Derek in place. Around them, the bar was silent, waiting. Everyone could feel it. Something bigger than a barroom argument was about to unfold. And for the first time that night, Derek realized he might not be the one in control. The room felt heavier now, as if the air itself knew something important was about to happen. Derek Cole stood stiff, trying to hold on to his bravado. Luis Romero smirked beside him, but his eyes darted nervously. And Naomi Carter? She looked completely unbothered, like a storm gathering under calm skies. She let the silence work for her. It stretched long enough to make people shift in their seats, to make Derek clear his throat, to make Luis tap his fingers on the table. Then Naomi tilted her head ever so slightly and let out a low chuckle. It wasn't loud. It wasn't mocking. But that small sound chilled a few veterans in the back corner. They exchanged quick glances, the kind of glances men share when they've seen shadows they never talk about. "You want details?" Naomi said finally, her tone quiet but sharp. "Be careful. Once you hear them, you can't pretend you didn't." Derek laughed, too forceful. "Lady, I'm not scared of your bedtime stories." Naomi leaned on the counter, rolling her sleeve higher. The falcon tattoo came into view in its full design. The wings folded close, each feather marked with tiny etchings. At first glance, they looked decorative. But as the bar's dim lights caught them, patterns emerged. 13 distinct marks, each feather a symbol. Beneath the bird's talons, smaller lines formed coded shapes. Luis squinted. "What the hell?" 13 feathers, Naomi said calmly. "For 13 impossible missions. Each one sanctioned but never recorded. Each one completed by teams that didn't officially exist." The words hit like a slap. The bar fell completely silent. Even the bartender, who had been polishing glasses, froze mid-motion. Derek tried to laugh again, but the sound cracked halfway. "Come on. You're telling me that tattoo proves you did something top secret? You could have copied it off the internet." Naomi's eyes glinted. "You think the internet has this?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out a faded photograph. Without ceremony, she placed it on the bar between them. The photo showed 5 figures standing in front of a makeshift desert outpost. Their uniforms weren't standard issue. Different cut, different gear. Behind them, equipment that looked years ahead of its time for when the photo had clearly been taken. Naomi was at the center, younger but unmistakable. The same steady eyes. Luis leaned in closer. This can't be real." Naomi's voice dropped lower, each word deliberate. "Iraq, 2008. Officially, that outpost never existed. Officially, the men in this picture were never deployed. And officially, the technology you see didn't exist for another 6 years." A veteran at the far table shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the brim of his cap. He muttered something under his breath, something about rumors he'd heard years ago. Derek's jaw tightened. "Fake, that's Photoshop. Anyone can stage a photo." Naomi turned her gaze on him, unblinking. "Do you really think I need Photoshop?" She slid the photo back into her pocket, her hand steady as ever. Then she looked around the bar, her eyes scanning exits, counting heads, assessing positions. It was subtle, instinctive, automatic, a habit carved into her bones, Derek noticed. He mistook it for nervousness. "See that?" She's sweating. She's scared we're about to expose her little story. But others saw something different. The older men recognized the scan. They'd done it themselves once, years ago, in places no map acknowledged. And it wasn't nerves. It was training. Luis tried again, eager to keep the spotlight. "Okay then, Miss Secret Soldier. If you're so legit, why are you sitting here in a bar instead of teaching cadets or giving lectures? Why waste time drinking whiskey alone?" Naomi's answer was a whisper that carried to every corner. Because sometimes legends need to remind the arrogant of what real power looks like. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The tone wasn't boastful. It was simply true. Derek clenched his fists. You think I'm going to believe this nonsense? I've fought, I've bled, I've buried friends. And you, he jabbed a finger at her arm. You sit here with some tattoo and a photograph expecting us to bow down? Naomi didn't blink. She straightened, taller than he realized, her presence filling the space between them. Her calmness was terrifying in its certainty. You think you know war, she said softly. You've seen battles. I've seen missions that never reached the news, never even made the files. Missions that changed the course of history before anyone outside the circle ever knew there was danger. Her voice rose just enough to echo against the wood-paneled walls. You think my tattoo is just ink? It's a language, a record of victories you will never read about. Victories that kept people safe while you were still learning how to hold a rifle. The silence afterward was deafening. Derek's face flushed, but his voice wavered when he tried to respond. You're bluffing. Naomi smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, but with the patience of someone who knows she doesn't need to prove anything. If you really want proof, she said, we can make a call. For a moment, it felt like time itself had stopped inside Harbor Light Bar. Derek Cole's face was red with defiance. Luis Romero's smirk faltered, and Naomi Carter stood unmoving, her presence filling every inch of silence. She had said the words so calmly, yet they carried the weight of something no one in that room expected. If you really want proof, we can make a call, Derek scoffed, trying to shake off the chill crawling up his spine. A call to who? Your tattoo artist? His laugh rang hollow. Naomi didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled a slip of paper from her wallet and slid it across the counter. On it, in neat handwriting, was a phone number. That's your unit's direct line. Go ahead, dial it. Ask for Colonel Harrington. The color drained from Luis's face. Harrington was their commanding officer. His name wasn't something outsiders tossed around casually. Derek snatched the paper, jaw clenched. How the hell do you know that name? Naomi met his glare without blinking. Let's just say the Colonel and I have history. He'll answer. The bar shifted again, the atmosphere tighter, denser. A few veterans leaned forward, drawn into the unfolding drama. Even the bartender, who had seen countless drunken scuffles, stopped wiping glasses and leaned on the counter, eyes wide. Derek's pride screamed at him not to back down. His gut whispered he was in way over his head. Pride won. He pulled out his phone, his hand steadier than he felt, and punched in the number. The room held its breath. 1 ring, 2, 3. On the 4th ring, a firm voice answered. Colonel Harrington speaking. Derek's throat went dry. He forced himself to sound casual. Sir, this is Sergeant Cole. I'm at Harbor Light Bar with a civilian who claims to know you. A woman named Naomi Carter. The silence that followed was longer than expected. Derek's stomach twisted. He pulled the phone slightly away, wondering if the call had dropped. Then Harrington's voice came back, only this time it sounded different. Lower, sharper, almost unsettled. Sergeant Cole, Harrington said, each syllable deliberate. Are you telling me you are confronting Naomi Carter? Right now? In public? Derek blinked. Yes, sir. She's making claims about service. I wanted to verify. Put her on the phone. The colonel's words cut like a blade. The bar erupted in whispers. Derek stared at Naomi, stunned, the phone trembling in his hand. She extended her palm, calm, expectant. Reluctantly, he placed the phone into her hand. Naomi turned slightly, stepping a few paces away. Her voice dropped low, too soft for most to hear. Still, every ear strained, every eye followed her. Luis leaned toward Derek. Man, what's going on? Why's the colonel sounding like that? Derek shook his head, sweat breaking across his brow. I don't know. As Naomi spoke quietly into the phone, her other hand slipped into her jacket. She pulled out a second device, a sleek, encrypted-looking phone, and her fingers began typing rapidly. In the window's reflection, Derek caught glimpses of names flashing across her screen. Names he recognized. Not low-level officers, not even mid-level. These were men and women at the top. Generals, commanders, people with careers that could end his with a single word. Luis whispered, panic creeping into his tone. She's messaging people. Multiple people. What the hell is she doing? Naomi finished her call and walked back. Calm as ever, she placed the phone gently on the bar between them. The colonel would like to speak with you again. Derek swallowed hard, his hand shaking as he picked up the phone. Sir? Harrington's voice was sharp now, edged with a fury Derek had never heard from him. You and Romero are to remain exactly where you are until I arrive. Do not leave that bar. Do not speak another word to her. Do you understand me? Derek stammered. See, sir, we were just silence. Harrington barked. I'll be there in 20 minutes. You've made the biggest mistake of your careers. The call ended abruptly. Derek lowered the phone, pale and sweating. Luis leaned close, whispering, What did he say? Before Derek could answer, Naomi reclaimed her seat at the bar. She signaled the bartender for another whiskey, as if the entire exchange had been nothing more than idle chatter. Luis's voice cracked. What the hell is happening? From the corner, one of the older veterans finally spoke up. His voice was steady, almost grave. Boys, you don't know who you're messing with, do you? Both soldiers turned, desperate. What do you mean? The veteran's eyes flicked toward Naomi. I was in Kandahar in 2009. Never met her face to face, but I heard the name. Carter. They called her a ghost. Said she ran missions that even generals pretended not to know about. He shook his head. If that's her, you've already lost. Luis's face went white. Derek tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. Stories. Old war stories. That's all, but deep down he knew. The phone call had shifted everything. This wasn't a game anymore, and with every tick of the clock, 20 minutes grew shorter. The sound of distant engines on the highway carried through the night air. Reinforcements were coming, and with them, answers Derek and Luis might not be ready to hear. The countdown began the moment Colonel Harrington hung up. 20 minutes. That's what he had said. For Derek Cole and Luis Romero, those minutes stretched like hours. Every tick of the clock above the bar pounded against their nerves. The once rowdy energy of Harbor Light Bar had shifted into a suffocating silence. Naomi Carter sat at the counter as if nothing unusual was happening. She sipped her fresh whiskey, her posture relaxed, her eyes calm. If anything, she looked bored, while Derek and Luis fought to swallow the lump of dread in their throats. Luis leaned closer to Derek. Man, we should just leave. Slip out before he gets here. But Derek shook his head, his pride refusing to yield even as his stomach churned. He said, Don't move. If we run, it's over for good. Whispers rippled through the bar. Patrons speculated in hushed voices. Words like classified, ghost unit, and black ops floated on the stale air. The bartender refused to meet Derek's eyes when he asked for water. Then it happened. Engines roared outside, low, heavy, disciplined. Not the casual hum of a car pulling up, but the growl of vehicles moving in formation. Tires crunched against gravel, doors slammed with precision. Through the bar's smudged window, headlights cut across the darkness. 3 black SUVs and 1 military van parked nose to nose, forming a tactical perimeter as if the bar itself were a target. The room froze. The door opened, and in walked Colonel Harrington. He wasn't alone. Behind him strode General Marcus Alvarez, head of Special Operations, his reputation notorious even among decorated soldiers. Flanking them was Major Evelyn West, Internal Affairs, known for dismantling careers with nothing more than a report. Their entrance was silent but commanding. No one laughed now. No one moved. Harrington's eyes swept the room and locked instantly on Derek and Luis. He marched forward, every step echoing like a gavel striking wood. He stopped inches from them, his voice low but seething with restrained fury. You two, Harrington said, have just made the gravest mistake of your careers. Derek opened his mouth to explain, but Harrington's glare silenced him. Luis dropped his gaze to the floor. Then Harrington turned, slowly, deliberately, and faced Naomi. His posture shifted. His back straightened, and in front of the entire bar, the colonel raised his hand in a crisp salute. General Carter, he said, his voice carrying both respect and something close to awe. On behalf of every soldier under my command, I apologize. Gasps filled the room. Derek's knees buckled. Luis's jaw dropped. The word hung in the air like thunder. General Naomi Carter, the quiet woman they had mocked, wasn't just a veteran. She wasn't even just a colonel. She was a retired brigadier general, one of the most decorated in the history of shadow operations. General Alvarez stepped forward, his deep voice cutting through the stunned silence. For 15 years, this woman commanded missions so classified, they never reached the files. She saved thousands of lives in places you will never read about, because those missions never officially happened. He gestured to Naomi's tattoo. That falcon you mocked? Each feather represents an operation that shaped global events. 5 in particular were deemed impossible. Yet she led them, and she succeeded. The bar was dead silent. Derek felt his throat tighten, shame burning his cheeks. Luis could barely breathe. Major West's eyes narrowed at the 2 young soldiers. And you, sergeants with barely a handful of years under your belt, thought mocking her was a joke worth making? Neither man could respond. Words had abandoned them. Naomi rose from her stool. Her movements were smooth, deliberate, every inch radiating authority. She stood face to face with Derek, then Luis, her eyes steady. "What should I do with you?" she asked softly. The question wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than any reprimand. The soldiers shrank under her gaze. Harrington clenched his fists, ready to order punishment, but Naomi lifted a hand. "No, let me decide." The tension in the bar thickened, pressing against every chest. Naomi took a step closer to the men who had ridiculed her, her presence towering without effort. "You thought you were lions in a room of sheep," she said, "but you mistook silence for weakness. You mistook restraint for fear, and tonight, you've learned that underestimating the wrong person carries consequences you can't even imagine." Her words landed like hammer strikes. No one dared to interrupt. Even General Alvarez bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the truth in her tone. Derek's pride collapsed. His arrogance evaporated. For the first time, he understood the depth of his mistake, not just embarrassing himself, but challenging someone whose name carried power in corridors he would never enter. Naomi's eyes flicked to the clock. "It's late," she said simply. "But your education is only beginning." She returned to her stool, her calmness restored. Harrington remained standing, his fury directed at Derek and Luis. "Do you understand who you've disrespected? Do you comprehend the scale of your failure tonight?" They nodded weakly, voices gone. Naomi raised her glass one last time, her lips curving into the faintest of smiles. "Now, gentlemen, are you ready to learn what humility feels like?" Colonel Harrington's instinct was immediate. Suspend them, strip their badges, reduce their rank. His face was tight with anger as he turned toward Derek Cole and Luis Romero. But before he could speak the words, Naomi Carter lifted her hand. "Not this time," she said quietly. The colonel paused, stunned. "General, with respect, these men, they don't need punishment," Naomi interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "They need perspective, and I intend to give it to them." The bar remained silent, all eyes fixed on her. Even General Alvarez leaned back slightly, intrigued. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. Naomi's gaze shifted back to Derek and Luis. "For 6 months, these 2 will serve under me. No suspension, no desk duty. They will train, dawn to dusk, in a program designed for one purpose: humility." The words hung in the air like a sentence heavier than prison. Derek felt his stomach drop. Luis looked pale. "This isn't mercy," Naomi continued. "It's transformation. They mocked service they didn't understand. Now they will learn what real service demands." The first week's training began at 4:30 every morning. No exceptions. Derek and Luis, who had once rolled into the barracks half awake, now stumbled into the yard under a black sky. Naomi was already there, waiting, her posture as sharp as sunrise. Push-ups until arms trembled. Runs through rain-soaked mud. Drills repeated until blisters broke and bled. But physical pain was only the beginning. Naomi added lessons that no manual included. The history of forgotten units. Missions erased from files. Names of soldiers who never returned but changed the course of wars. She made them recite those names until they stuck like prayers. "You think strength is about muscles," she told them one dawn, as they gasped for air after a punishing run. "Strength is discipline. Strength is carrying a mission on your back without complaint, breaking down arrogance." The transformation wasn't instant. At first, Derek clung to defiance. "I already know how to fight," he muttered one morning. Naomi's response was swift. She handed him a training knife and squared off herself. Within seconds, he was flat on his back, the blade pressed lightly against his throat. Her voice was steady as she stepped away. Skill without humility is wasted. Do you understand now? The lesson burned deeper than any bruise. Luis faced his own reckoning during a negotiation drill. He mocked the exercise, laughing at pretend diplomacy. Naomi watched in silence. Then she replayed a classified scenario, an operation where one failed negotiation had cost dozens of lives. Luis stared at the file, silent. He never laughed in those drills again. 6 months of change weeks bled into months. Derek and Luis grew leaner, stronger, but more importantly, quieter. The swagger that once filled every room had been chipped away by repetition, exhaustion, and the steady weight of Naomi's lessons. She taught them to listen, to observe before speaking, to respect the silence of others instead of filling it with arrogance. There were nights they collapsed into their bunks, too tired to think, yet Naomi still demanded reflection. Write down what humility means to you, she ordered. At first the pages were empty. By month 4 the words flowed like confessions. A lesson in power one morning, Naomi assembled them at dawn beneath the gray Virginia sky. Tell me, she said, what is the difference between strength and power? Derek hesitated, sweat dripping down his face. He remembered her words, the months of lessons, the weight of every drill. Finally, he answered, strength is what you show, he said slowly. Power is what you don't have to prove. Naomi's expression softened just slightly. Good. Now you're beginning to understand. Beyond the training, the transformation didn't go unnoticed. Other units began watching Naomi's program, curious. Word spread that General Carter's methods broke arrogance better than any suspension ever could. By the end of 6 months, Derek and Luis weren't the same men who had mocked a tattoo in a bar. They stood straighter but not with swagger. Their voices carried weight but not arrogance. Naomi addressed them one final morning, her tone even but proud. You came to me reckless. You leave with respect. Remember this, true power never shouts. It simply is. Derek and Luis exchanged a look. They both knew it was true. Operation Humility had done its job, and Naomi Carter had turned 2 wayward soldiers into leaders who finally understood what it meant to serve. 6 months after that unforgettable night in Harbor Light Bar, the world looked different for Derek Cole and Luis Romero. They had entered Naomi Carter's program cocky, dismissive, full of the kind of arrogance that feeds on youth and adrenaline. They left it humbled, sharper, transformed. Naomi Carter had not simply trained them, she had reshaped them. What began as punishment had become something greater, the rebirth of 2 men who now understood that respect was not optional. It was the foundation of service. A new reputation news of Operation Humility spread quickly. What started with 2 reckless rangers grew into a model adopted across bases nationwide. Commanders requested Carter's training modules. Cadets whispered her name in the halls. Veterans who had once carried quiet doubts about the next generation now saw a path toward discipline. And Harbor Light Bar, the place where it all began, became a landmark of sorts. A plaque was mounted near the entrance. Here, General Naomi Carter reminded us that humility is the strongest weapon a soldier can carry. Patrons read it in silence before stepping inside. For some, it was a warning. For others, inspiration. Derek and Luis Derek Cole, once defined by arrogance, now carried himself differently. When he spoke to younger recruits, his tone was steady, his lessons personal. I learned the hard way, he admitted during orientation sessions. Underestimating someone isn't just disrespectful, it's dangerous. The strongest people in the room are usually the quietest. Luis Romero found a new calling. Assigned as a diversity and leadership coordinator, he developed workshops on unconscious bias and respect. Soldiers under his guidance no longer rolled their eyes at the idea of empathy. They listened because his story carried the weight of truth. Both men bore invisible scars from the night they mocked Naomi Carter. But those scars became their compass, pointing them toward a better version of themselves. Naomi's rise, Naomi Carter herself, did not fade back into obscurity. Her program's success reignited recognition long overdue. The Pentagon called her back into advisory roles. Military academies invited her to speak. Eventually, she accepted a historic promotion. Major General Naomi Carter, the first black woman to officially command covert training programs for special operations. Her speeches were never loud. Her words never indulgent. She simply told stories, shared lessons, and let the silence between her sentences say more than any headline ever could. When cadets asked her how she handled disrespect, she smiled and answered, by turning it into education, revenge is temporary. Transformation lasts. A living lesson. The legacy of that night grew beyond the walls of the military. Civilian communities shared the story. News outlets reported on the program. Parents told their children about the woman who turned humiliation into strength. Naomi became a living lesson. Not because she fought back with fists or fury, but because she used wisdom, patience, and discipline to rewrite the future of two young men who didn't know better. At Harbor Light, veterans who once sat in silence now told newcomers the tale. They pointed to the stool where Naomi had sipped her whiskey, and to the spot where two soldiers had nearly thrown away their careers. The final word, on the last day of training, Naomi had gathered Derek and Luis before sunrise. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and violet. She stood before them, hands clasped behind her back. "Tell me," she asked one last time, "what have you learned?" Derek spoke first. His voice was steady, without bravado. "That strength is temporary if it isn't rooted in respect." Luis nodded. "That power isn't about proving yourself. It's about serving others without needing recognition." Naomi's expression softened. "Good, then you finally understood." She paused, letting the weight of silence carry the lesson deeper. Then she said the words that would echo in their lives forever. True leadership doesn't come from rank, or medals, or missions. It comes from how much respect you show, for yourself, for others, for those who came before you. Never forget that. The story of Naomi Carter spread far beyond a barroom in Norfolk. It became a parable whispered in training halls, a cautionary tale in military manuals, and an inspiration for anyone who had ever been underestimated. They had mocked her tattoo. They had doubted her past. But in the end, Derek Cole and Luis Romero discovered the truth. Naomi Carter was not just a soldier, not just a general, she was a hidden legend. And her greatest victory was not the missions the world would never know, but the lives she transformed in plain sight. They mocked a tattoo, but discovered a legacy. They tried to humiliate a stranger, but ended up transformed by a hidden general. Naomi Carter didn't just win an argument in a bar. She changed two young men and through them an entire generation. Her greatest revenge was not punishment. It was transformation, and that's the kind of victory no arrogance can ever erase. So the next time you see someone underestimated, remember this: the quietest person in the room may be the one carrying the weight of 1,000 untold stories. If this touched your heart, share it. Let someone else feel what true respect sounds like. Because in the end, the strongest weapon we have is not pride. It's humility.